What's happening now across the Niagara frontier? News stories, old stories, stuff you know about and stuff you'd never believe. It's the NiagaraHub Soapbox with Craig Avery.
We've got former mayor, and we always call you Mayor Vince Anello. Welcome, buddy.
Well, I appreciate the respect.
We saw him walking around the streets after his show here, like just
Trying to
wandering
unwind.
aimlessly.
Right, just unwinding after having Senator Maziarz on this show. Talk about being wound up. He certainly was. He was ready to let it rip this morning, and I let him talk, which I often find that I challenge my guests, in that sense. And he kind of gave us updates on things that are important to the district.
Cool. He's getting involved. So
He is.
big time.
I mean, the politics, is still there, alive and well, and we discussed that a little bit. But the fact of the matter is that we live in a political world, and we need to work with it and cope with it.
Sure.
But we have to get the business of the city taken care of.
Yeah, well, definitely. Well, it's good to, and he never shies away from the opportunity to talk, and you certainly.
Yeah, he was supposed to be on last week, but the president's visit, interfered with that, so he came today, which I thought was kind of nice.
So the president came instead, right? He talked with you there.
Well,
for a
yeah,
while.
President Obama. He was going to come to the show, but the studio wasn't big enough for his security.
What I don't get is anybody else puts tints on their car and they get a ticket, right?
I know.
He pulls out in that big bus.
Can't see who it is.
You can't see
Right.
anybody in there. Why don't they pull the bus over and say, hey, what's going on?
But I certainly feel that the city of Niagara Falls, has great potential. We've discussed that, numerous times. I'm glad to see a new blood, and certainly I'm glad to see that there are investors in this town, in a sense, that really are banking on the future of the city of Niagara Falls, and you're one of them. And for me, that gives me confidence that Niagara Falls is going to come back.
Good. Last night we had the candidates forum, was it called, or meet the candidates? Or,
Yeah, meet the candidates night.
What'd you think of that?
Well,
There were
I thought
7 people.
the turnout was very good. 7 candidates. You had the panelists. Certainly, the questions I think were, the questions were important, and I think the only issue I have with it, and it is not an issue about the format or the venue, is just what I favor when I'm talking to political public officials or political people, is that I often feel that the follow-up question is more important than your initial question. Because the initial question, most public officials are already prepared for it.
Right.
Everybody wants less crime,
Yeah.
better neighborhoods,
Every city across America.
more parks,
Just take it out of
fix the streets, lower taxes. Okay, well, those things are nice to hear, but when you're a public official, you have to address the issue of, lower taxes, taking care of the streets, and you can't talk about lower taxes and increasing public safety. Where are you going to get the revenue from?
Right.
So I wish there were more questions that said, okay, do you know where the city of Niagara Falls gets their money to operate? Okay? Do you know that every tax dollar that taxpayers in the city of Niagara Falls pay actually goes to public safety? Do you know that the Department of Public Works and all the other city services, which includes the City Hall, and the staff of City Hall, do you know that comes from fees and fines, from the sales tax revenue, the share of the sales tax revenue, also the state aid? There's other revenue sources. So now if a council member or a mayor candidate came up and said, if I become mayor or if I become a councilman, this is the new source of revenue I'm going to bring into town, then I believe that you're one of the people for the job. If you tell me that you're going to come in, clean up City Hall, okay, you're going to cut the waste and the surplus staff, I have to say that you don't have a clue about city government. Because I can tell you from personal experience, there isn't any waste. There aren't any overstaffed departments. And there isn't any leverage or any margin for you to be able to lower taxes. Not being truthful and honest, and the numbers back me up. Now, does that mean that we couldn't become more efficient? Yes, we could. Does that mean that you could get more work in an 8-hour day than what we're getting right now? In some departments, yes. Some departments are working, you know, an unbelievable amount of, putting out an unbelievable amount of work compared to the department, the size of the department. HR is one of them, you know, human resources. So, you know, to make those kind of blanket statements, you know, and saying the things that everybody wants to hear, well, that's nice on your first date, okay? But, you know, sooner or later, you're going to have to start being honest with each other. If you want a long-lasting relationship, sooner or later, you're going to have to, you know, talk to each other, okay?
Third base is harder to get to than first.
That's, okay, so, you know, the point is that I have no problem with a council candidate or a mayoral candidate or a legislative candidate, you know, putting out a presentation that's flowery and hopeful, imaginative. But sooner or later, I want to know, what are you going to do different? If everything you tell me is opposite of what's going on, what's your thing? For instance, one of the things that came up last night, see, and this is why I believe follow-up questions are important. A number of candidates mentioned that the city books should be audited. Well, folks, I have news for you. They're audited all the time. And we even asked the state controller to audit our books. So you're not going to find any fraud. You know, you're not going to find anything like that. So just to say it because it sounds good, all it tells me is that you haven't really gone to City Hall and find out what the process really is. That's number one. Number two, you're going to cut back on city workforce. Okay, which workforce are you going to cut back on? The ones that plow the snow in the winter? The ones that fix the streets in the summer? Are you going to cut back on the forestry department, who's trying to keep up with just the tree stumps alone of the trees they've cut? Exactly what department are you talking about? Are you talking about police and fire? Because you can't talk about public safety and then tell me that you're going to reduce the workforce. I believe that in the last 20 years, the workforce has been cut to the point where some departments have been damaged by the number of cuts. Now, if you tell me that you're going to improve the quality of the workforce, fine. Last night, one candidate said that the first thing he would do is, if you're not doing your work, they're going to fire you. Okay, that shows me that you have no clue whatsoever of union contracts and civil service. Try it. Try firing somebody. Just try it and see what happens. So, again, without the follow-up questions, it bothers me a little bit because I don't feel that the real information is getting out to the public. A good example of that is that if you review the tapes from last night, you will see that in the first 4 questions, 4 different questions, most of the candidates gave the same answers, not as the person next to them. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the same answer to 4 different questions. How is that possible? Everybody was talking about crime, improving public safety, lowering taxes, and taking care of the neighborhoods. Okay, well, here's how you take care of the neighborhoods. In our case, we have to do demolitions. Well, it costs money to do demolitions. You want more security in your neighborhoods or certain parts of town? For every about 9 police officers that you're going to hire, you need $1 million worth of revenue to bring into the city of Niagara Falls. Where are you going to get it? Now, you can talk about it, and you can wish you had more police. I wish we had more police, okay? But I also know how much we can afford. So, in our case, we worked with the chief, you know, present administration, past administration. You try to work out an organizational plan that makes sense in your own community, you know. And you're always chasing the dollar, and they do that through grants and everything else. So, the only way you can become more efficient at City Hall is by instituting and changing the specifications for the jobs. I did that as a public official. I tried to do that as a councilman and then did it as a mayor. I mean, you have entry-level positions at City Hall that require just a GED. But if you're going to go into the civil service union where you're a clerk, you would expect somebody would have some basic understanding of word processing. Well, why not put that into the specs? All right? If you believe that there's a drug issue or a substance abuse issue with your workforce, what are you doing to help mitigate that? Because you have to use the carrot and the stick. You have to support people that have a substance abuse, but at the same time, you have to monitor the substance abuse issue that you might be suspecting. How are they doing with random drug testing in the city, within the city workforce? Is there random drug testing? I know it's in the books. What I'm saying is it being practiced adequately? So it's easy for a candidate, to say that he can do something different, he can do something better, but without bringing the nuts and bolts of how you're going to do it, well, we can all say the same thing. You can run for council, say the same thing,
The specifics of all these things, as you said, are easy to say. I would just love to hear how they're going to work together with somebody else that may or may not be their political affiliation or their sexual preference or whatever.
Well, let me ask you this. Here's the thing, and you were at the forum, the candidates forum. At some point, I expected for this question to be asked. What are the three things that you feel, the top three things that you feel are hurting the city of Niagara Falls the most? Name them. What do you feel are the three solutions? Forget the money. Forget the manpower. But if you were a king or a queen, how would you fix it? How would you fix it? Now we're getting somewhere. Because everybody said, and everybody agreed last night, we need development in Niagara Falls. Hello. Somebody wants to build a hotel in Niagara Falls. How are we doing with that? Nobody asked that question. Now, the council needs more information. I'm all for that. I was a pain in the butt as a councilman because information was the lifeline, okay? What I couldn't make up in charm, I made up with information, But the point was that, I was well informed and well prepared for council meetings, and I tried to do the same thing as mayor. And even in my worst day as mayor, there isn't one councilman that can say that I closed the door on him. And Councilman Frashone has mentioned that several times publicly, that my door was always open to every single council member. They chose not to come in, but they can never say, even in election time, that Anello shut the door on them. So I think those are the important things that need to be brought out at these candidates. How well are you going to work with everybody else?
Do you have optimism that whoever gets elected, that this is going to be an improvement to productivity in the city, as far from City Hall? Do you think that whatever happens, this election will?
I'm optimistic about the city of Niagara Falls. I'm not optimistic that this next election is going to put us on a path to recovery in the sense that we're all getting along, and that everybody's going to hold hands and at least pray together once a week. A lot of people go to church on Sunday, okay, and then you really want to know what they're doing after church. All right, and I don't mean going to breakfast at the market site. I mean, what are they really doing on their day job? And this is the way I feel about the council. It's nice to talk about working together, but what are you going to do to work together?
Right.
I'll give you an example. It might be just a simple example that might not mean anything to anybody that's going to see this tape. There was a resolution on one of the council meetings. There were the council meeting that Hamister was at. Aside from the embarrassment of what they put the developer through, there was a resolution that complimented Laborers Local 91 on their efforts for their workers, their union members, education center, and really starting some programs that make some sense to the labor union, which I think is commendable, and it required a resolution. There were only 3 names in that resolution. The block, okay? So I went up to the business agent and I asked him, I said, let me see the resolution. And I noticed there was 3 names. I says, why are the other 2 names not there? He says, well, they don't like me. Yeah, but did they ask him to put the name on him? And did they refuse to put the name on? He couldn't answer that. Well, my suspicion is, I don't think, especially in an election year, that Councilwoman Grandinetti or Councilman Charlie Walker refuse to have their names added to a fluff resolution. Okay? So when it's as petty as that, you think that's going to, after this election, people are going to get along? It's too deep.
That's interesting.
It's too deep.
All right, well, that was short and sweet. We're gonna have you keep coming when you're wandering around. You can come here.
But I'm very hopeful though about the city of Niagara Falls. That's why I try to encourage people to really try to stick it out. And I know that you're one of them.
Well, we do one little thing at a time, and we intend at this time to keep it as visible as possible of
Right.
our efforts through the permitting process and the applications for all the different programs in order to take another one of these dinosaur bones and turn them into something that lives and breathes. And
Exactly.
that's what we
Dinosaur
wanna
bones,
do.
they should be in a
So,
museum. Maybe we can start a museum.
we could start a museum. That would be good. So, all right, man. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good to
Thank you
see
very
you.
much.